Hello. Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. On September 20th, 1994, shocking news spread throughout South Korea. The Gangnam police station had arrested all members of the Jeonpa gang. The mere mention of Jeonpa immediately evoked images of a violent criminal organization and ruthless serial killings. This was truly a horrific case, with the main perpetrator Kim Gi-hwan and his 6 accomplices kidnapping and murdering 5 innocent people under the pretext of hatred toward the upper class. However, before the public could breathe a sigh of relief, another murder occurred, prompting police to immediately issue an arrest warrant. The wanted suspect this time was Bo-hyeon, 37 years old, charged with murder and attempted murder. With 13 prior violent offenses, he was an extremely dangerous individual. Shockingly, just 1 week after the warrant was issued, Bo-hyeon voluntarily turned himself in at the police station with an unbelievable attitude. He kicked open the door, walked in arrogantly, puffed out his chest and challenged, "You police officers, I'm here to surrender. Compare me with Jeonpa and see who's truly more frightening." The strange thing was that even at the police station, Bo-hyeon proudly boasted about his crimes, as if recounting achievements, clearly wanting to compete with the Jeonpa gang. He declared arrogantly, "Officers, Jeonpa had 6 members but only killed 5 people. As for me, I alone killed 2 people. Clearly I'm stronger, right? Please imprison me with Jeonpa." Faced with this unexpected reaction, the police officers could only shake their heads in astonishment. But the surprise didn't end there. The crimes Bo-hyeon confessed to weren't just the one murder the police knew about, but 2 murders. He even confessed to 4 other attempted murders, cases the police were completely unaware of. Immediately, a special investigation team was formed to uncover the truth behind these horrific incidents. Before delving into the details, let's learn about Bo-hyeon as a person. He was born in Seonapni village in Gyeonggumyeon, Gimjae City, Jeollabuk-do province, a rural area where the uncommon On family had lived for generations. Bo-hyeon was the second son among 5 siblings. In his childhood, he was gentle, often eagerly helping adults in the village, and was beloved by the entire community. However, the atmosphere at home was completely opposite. Bo-hyeon's father was a heavy alcoholic who frequently beat his wife when drunk and regularly committed adultery. Growing up in this environment of domestic violence, Bo-hyeon's personality gradually changed, and he became increasingly distant from his studies. Eventually, he dropped out before completing middle school, and was later exempted from military service due to not meeting the minimum educational requirements. At age 21, Bo-hyeon began working as a taxi driver. His motivation was simple. He had a girlfriend and needed money for dating. For about a year, he worked traveling between Seoul and Jeollabuk-do province until he caused a traffic accident in Seoul and was fired by the taxi company. The accident not only resulted in a fine, but also led to his breakup with his girlfriend. Meanwhile, the family situation hadn't improved. His father continued to verbally and physically abuse his wife and children daily, even when Bo-hyeon was 24 years old. Finally, unable to endure anymore, after a fierce argument with his father, Bo-hyeon left a note written in blood with the vow, "I will never return to this home again," and left, cutting all ties with his family. After leaving his family, Bo-hyeon headed to the slums of Seoul. Without specialized skills or education, he struggled to find stable employment and lived as a homeless person. He once worked at a heavy equipment company to make a living but couldn't stay long. For the next 10 years, he constantly changed jobs, from bus driver to construction worker, but nowhere could keep him. Realizing he couldn't adapt to the work environment, Bo-hyeon decided to start his own business. He invested all his savings to open a produce store, but this project quickly failed, pushing his financial situation into a dead end. Then, in August 1984, devastating news arrived. His mother, still living in their hometown, couldn't bear her husband's abuse anymore and committed suicide by poisoning herself. At this point, Bo-hyeon's heart was filled with hatred. In his mind, it was his father who had driven his mother to death. For the next 10 years, he lived completely cut off from his father and the entire family. By August 1994, on the 10th anniversary of his mother's death, Bo-hyeon decided to return to his hometown after a decade of separation. When facing his father, there was no joy, only the violently erupting rage that had been suppressed for so long. He was determined not to let the person who had destroyed their family continue to live peacefully and began planning murder. Bo-hyeon stayed at his uncle's house in the village for 4 days, borrowed a shovel and pickaxe from villagers, then climbed the family hill to dig a hole intended for burying his father's body. Many villagers, including his uncle, witnessed this action but misunderstood it, thinking he was tending to ancestral graves. They were even moved by what they thought was the filial piety of a son who had been away from home for many years. Afterward, Bo-hyeon returned to Seoul to prepare weapons. He searched hardware stores, buying a hammer, lighter fluid, and tape. However, during the preparation, another idea suddenly flashed in his mind. Simply killing my father would be too easy. He must endure suffering worse than death. Bo-hyeon realized that instead of directly killing his father, he wanted to make him live in humiliation and despair. He calculated that if the whole country knew his son was a serial killer, his father would never dare step into the village again and might end his own life due to guilt and shame about raising a child who became a criminal. While planning his crimes, Bo-hyeon felt apprehensive about confronting people stronger than himself. From here, his thinking began to distort in a monstrous way. Finally, he set a horrific goal: to kill 38 women, exactly matching his age. All just to make his father bear lifelong disgrace about his son. An extremely twisted and sick plan. When devising his method of attack, Bo-hyeon suddenly recalled his experience as a taxi driver. He thought of a notable discovery. At many taxi stands in Seoul's suburbs, there were often abandoned cars with keys still in the ignition. This was the perfect opportunity to steal a car without obstacles. Moreover, if using a taxi, he wouldn't need to devise complicated kidnapping plans. Victims would voluntarily step into his trap. With this in mind, Bo-hyeon went to the parking lot in Suyuri, an area he was familiar with, and quickly stole a Hyundai Stellar taxi. Then, he changed the license plate with a counterfeit plate from another company. The first case occurred on the morning of August 28, 1994. "Where would you like to go?" Bo-hyeon politely asked when picking up a female college student at the Amsadong intersection in Gangdong district. Although the girl only wanted to go to school, the taxi suddenly turned in the opposite direction, speeding straight toward the Yeongdong Expressway. Bo-hyeon accelerated frantically, constantly looking for a deserted location. In the back, the victim trembled in despair, continually begging, "Please spare me. Please spare me." Afterward, Bo-hyeon considered how to handle the victim. He tied Ms. Kwon tightly, put her in the car, and drove a long distance. He headed toward his hometown of Seonapni, Gimje, remembering the hole he had previously dug to bury his father. Thinking he could use this location, he dragged the bound victim to the hole and continued to rape her. Then, he robbed cash and checks totaling 12 million won, approximately $12,000, from Ms. Kwon. When preparing to bury the victim alive, he suddenly realized that dawn was breaking. After a long night of crime and driving a long distance, fatigue suddenly overcame Bo-hyeon. "Damn, I need to rest for a while. Anyway, this is an isolated family hill. No one passes by." With overconfidence, he believed that just tying the victim tightly would be enough to prevent her escape. Before leaving to find a place to rest, he used rope to tie Ms. Kwon's mouth and feet to a nearby tree, then confidently left the scene. For victim Kwon, this was an excellent opportunity to escape. With extraordinary determination to survive, she continuously rubbed her bound arms against the tree trunk. After dozens of minutes of constant effort, the rope finally broke apart. Without hesitation, she quickly removed all the bindings and ran frantically down the hill. As if by miracle, she discovered a group of construction workers nearby and immediately asked them to call the police. When Bo-hyeon woke up and returned to check, he was stunned to find the victim had disappeared. Damn, she must have reported to the police! But the time to escape was too short. In this urgent situation, he decided to abandon the taxi as evidence and hide deep in the forest. Indeed, not long after, police forces arrived at the scene. They quickly discovered and confiscated the taxi, but couldn't find Bo-hyeon, who was holding his breath hidden in the forest. After a prolonged but futile search, when the police withdrew, the criminal dared to sneak out of hiding, fortunately caught another taxi to Daejeon, and escaped by a hair's breadth. Meanwhile, police began vigorously investigating the rape and kidnapping. They discovered the perpetrator's sophisticated method of operation, stealing taxis and changing license plates, a clear sign that the perpetrator must be familiar with taxi company operations. With this hypothesis, police began screening all taxi drivers who had worked in the Suyuri area over the past 5 years. However, they overlooked an important detail. Bo-hyeon had worked as a taxi driver since 1979, 15 years ago, and records from this period were no longer kept. Simultaneously, police also noticed a significant clue. The crime occurred on a family hill, suggesting that the culprit must have a connection to this area. Based on victim Kwan's detailed testimony, they created a sketch portrait and began questioning local residents. The response came quickly and accurately. "Isn't this Bo-hyeon, the second son of the family down there?" With just one question, the identity of the killer was exposed. However, a major problem remained. Bo-hyeon had escaped. If he stole another taxi and continued his trick of changing license plates, tracking him would be nearly impossible. And as feared, Bo-hyeon did exactly that, stole a new vehicle, attached fake plates, and prepared to continue his bloody chain of crimes with no sign of stopping. On September 11th, Bo-hyeon prowled the Doksan-dong area of Guro District, Seoul at dusk. His new victim was Ms. Eom, a 21-year-old hotel employee on her way home after her shift. When the taxi entered a deserted road, Bo-hyeon quickly pulled out a weapon to subdue the victim. He forced Ms. Eom to remain silent and took her to a desolate hill in Hwangseong, Gangwon Province, a location far from Seoul that he carefully chose to avoid pursuit. There, he raped her twice and robbed her of 300,000 won, approximately $300. Although the method of attack remained unchanged, this time a bizarre new idea emerged in Bo-hyeon's mind. How interesting it would be to kidnap another woman. Controlled by this crazy thought, he tied Ms. Eom tightly to a tree trunk and left the scene, intending to return after hunting for a new victim. However, Ms. Eom, with a strong will to live, persistently rubbed the bindings against the rough tree bark. After hours of constant effort, she managed to remove the bindings and fortunately escaped. By now, all victims had successfully escaped. But the next case ended tragically. On the evening of September 12th at 9 p.m., Bo-hyeon shifted to the bustling Gangnam area and targeted a new victim, Ms. Heo, a 26-year-old office worker waiting for a taxi in front of the POSCO building. What made this particularly heartbreaking was that Ms. Heo was preparing for her wedding, with dreams and happy plans for the future. After driving for a while, Bo-hyeon immediately revealed his dark intentions, threatening Ms. Heo with a knife. He searched for credit cards and mobile phones from her purse, then forced her to reveal her PIN. Afterward, he drove straight to the hill in Hwangseong, where he had previously held Ms. Eom captive. Upon arrival, Bo-hyeon was shocked to see the location completely empty. The previous victim had successfully escaped. Without hesitation, Bo-hyeon quickly adjusted his plan. To avoid police pursuit, he dragged Ms. Heo into the car and drove to another deserted hill in Singalbuk, Gyeonggi Province. There, he attempted to rape her, but thanks to the victim's determined resistance, he failed. This event pushed Bo-hyeon's rage to its peak. The consecutive failures, previous victims all escaping and now he couldn't even satisfy his perverted desires, caused Bo-hyeon to completely lose his reason. In a frenzy, he put a plastic bag over Ms. Heo's head, then repeatedly struck her body with a shovel until the victim stopped breathing, becoming the first casualty in his chain of crimes. After leaving the crime scene, he took the credit card he had stolen from Ms. Heo to the bank. To prevent bank staff from checking his identity, he pasted his photo onto Ms. Heo's ID card. Though very crude, that was how he created the forgery. On the morning of September 13th at 9 a.m., he went to an ATM in Pungnap-dong and withdrew 610,000 won, approximately $610. Meanwhile, unable to contact Ms. Heo, Her family reported her missing from the night before. The next morning, they discovered her credit card had been used. Police immediately checked surveillance footage at the ATM and saw Bo-hyeon, unmasked, brazenly withdrawing money. Police realized he had been using taxis to kidnap multiple people consecutively, and the sketch also matched. Therefore, a nationwide arrest warrant was issued. After 3 failures and 1 murder, most people would stop, but Bo-hyeon was truly beyond redemption. Instead, his rate of crime increased. He knew the police were close on his trail, so on September 13th, he picked up a 19-year-old office worker named No at the Cheonho-dong intersection in Gangdong district. The method of attack remained the same, threatening with a knife on the highway and rape. However, this time there was an unexpected variable. Ms. No's reaction was very different from previous victims. She didn't resist but remained calm and even asked him, "Why are you doing this?" This calm reaction surprised Bo-hyeon. He began to tell her about his circumstances and childhood past. Ms. No listened and responded, "You must have suffered a lot." Just one sentence expressing deep empathy with Bo-hyeon. Later it was learned that Ms. No, only 19 years old, had lost her father at a young age and had to care for her siblings alone as the family caretaker. She had to work from an early age and was still struggling with a difficult life. When hearing about her difficult life story, Bo-hyeon suddenly felt empathy. He made a surprising gesture, removing the watch he was wearing and giving it to her, saying, "Take this to help with your life." That morning, Bo-hyeon drove Ms. No all the way home to Godeokdong, then drove away to continue his crimes. The final victim in Bo-hyeon's chain of crimes was Ms. Park, a 24-year-old teacher working at a special school in Ilsan, Gyeonggi Province. On the evening of September 14th at 9 p.m., he picked her up in the Garekdong area. Just minutes after the taxi began moving and stopped at a red light, Bo-hyeon immediately pulled out a knife to threaten her. However, unlike previous victims, Ms. Park reacted with extraordinary courage. She bit his hand hard, struggled fiercely, and tried to escape from the car. While struggling to subdue her, Bo-hyeon accidentally cut his own hand. Seeing his own blood dripping, a frenzy erupted in Bo-hyeon. Completely out of control, he repeatedly stabbed Ms. Park brutally with a knife. When the victim lay motionless, he drove off to find a place to dispose of the body. This time, Bo-hyeon headed toward the distant Gyeongbuk province. Notable in this case was that the killer's trajectory spread across South Korea, from Seoul to many other provinces. He chose the Gyeongbu Expressway because it had a special feature, an emergency runway designed for fighter jets in emergency situations. Bo-hyeon knew this was an area with little traffic. He stopped the car in the emergency lane beside the runway, although there were still occasional vehicles passing by. To avoid attention, he turned on the hazard lights and opened the trunk, pretending to have car trouble. After patiently waiting until the area was completely deserted, he quickly pulled the victim's body out of the car and pushed it into a 10-foot deep drainage ditch beside the road. After disposing of the body, Bo-hyeon needed to treat the wound on his hand and find a hideout. He went to Cheonho-dong, Seoul, and hid in a motel for 13 days. During these 2 weeks, he thought a lot. He realized that his targets were women, whom he considered weaker than himself. But recalling how the last victim had strongly resisted, biting his hand and wounding him, he began to doubt whether he could continue to succeed. He also feared that with all the crimes he had committed, whether he could continue to succeed if he committed more crimes. On September 21st, Bo-hyeon accidentally turned on the TV and witnessed the media extensively covering the arrest of the Jijampa gang. At this moment, he made an extremely bizarre action. He began to meticulously record all his crimes, every detail of what he had done, his methods, and his routes, all compiled into a complete diary. Then, with a distorted psychology, he even compared his criminal achievements with the Jijampa gang. They had 6 members but only killed 5 people. As for me, I alone killed 2 people. Clearly I'm stronger, right? Moreover, Bo-hyeon also nurtured an inexplicable pathological sense of competition. He believed that with more audacious and horrific crimes, he deserved more public attention than the Jijampa gang. It was precisely because of this distorted thinking that on the 27th, he actively went to the police station and surrendered. It's hard to imagine that South Korea would produce a criminal with such a perverted psychology. When arriving at the police station, Bo-hyeon not only confessed, but also brought all the evidence. His crime diary, Ms. Hayo's ID card, 5 fake ID cards, the hammer bought from the hardware store, lighter fluid, and even fake taxi license plates. Even more astonishing was that later, during the on-site inspection with numerous press reporters present, Bo-hyeon continuously asked eagerly, "Will I be on the front page of the newspaper today? Not Jijongpa, right?" The question was repeated, revealing his extremely distorted psychology. The trial proceeded quickly and ended with the harshest sentence. Bo-hyeon was sentenced to death for robbery, murder, and concealment of a corpse. Notably, he completely waived his right to appeal, causing the sentence to be executed immediately. On November 2, 1995, Bo-hyeon, along with members of the Jijongpa gang, those with whom he always wanted to compete in criminal achievements, faced their final moments in execution. The Bo-hyeon case is considered an unprecedented phenomenon in South Korean criminal history. The most difficult thing to understand is how his deep hatred toward his father transformed into the act of killing completely innocent women. His thoughts frequently transformed illogically, jumping from one idea to another without consistency. Why did he act so impulsively and crudely? Why didn't he give up after many consecutive failures? And perhaps the most puzzling thing is the story of Ms. No. How could a brutal person like Bo-hyeon suddenly give his watch to a victim and let her go free? Considering just this action alone, he seemed to still have a small corner of conscience and humanity. Behind this case are too many unanswered questions. If Bo-hyeon were still alive, he would certainly become a primary research subject in the field of criminal psychology in South Korea. Perhaps his anger was not only directed at his father, but also stemmed from deep psychological disorders that had existed for a long time, just waiting for an opportunity to erupt into action. Next will still be a case from South Korea. What's New from SBS is one of South Korea's most famous investigative programs. This program debuted in March 1992 and has become an icon of investigative journalism, thanks to its ability to shed light on many mysterious cases and complex social issues. In October 2019, the production team received important information that could completely change a long-standing case. A man had actively contacted them, wishing to confess secrets weighing on his conscience. He revealed a murder that had occurred 20 years earlier with a surprising statement. "I only told them to teach him a lesson, but things got out of control." This man admitted he was the mastermind who had hired others to commit the murder. This important informant was Mr. Kim, a 53-year-old man living in Cambodia. The case he confessed to was related to the murder of a Jeju lawyer, one of South Korea's most shocking unsolved cases. On the morning of November 5, 1999, a horrifying scene was discovered. A man's body lying in a Hyundai Sonata parked in front of the Jeju Postal Logistics Center in Samdo-dong, Jeju City. The crime scene was covered in blood, both inside the car and on the road, reflecting the brutality of the killing. The autopsy results showed that the victim had 6 deep wounds from a sharp weapon concentrated in the arm and chest areas. The direct cause of death was excessive blood loss due to the heart being pierced. Notably, the murder weapon had to be an exceptionally sharp tool, strong enough to penetrate the ribcage and stab directly into the victim's heart. Forensic experts agreed that an ordinary knife could not cause such deep and severe wounds. However, at the scene, no trace of the weapon or perpetrator was found. From the brutal nature of the attack, police could only hypothesize that this was a murder motivated by deep hatred. The victim was identified as Lee Sung-yong, a 44-year-old former prosecutor who later became a lawyer in Jeju. As criminologists often note, the legal profession can inadvertently create enemies due to courtroom outcomes. Based on this hypothesis, police thoroughly investigated people who had been associated with Mr. Lee with the suspicion that a client might have harbored a grudge and sought revenge. However, surprisingly, the deeper police investigated Lee Seung-yong's character, the more positive stories they discovered about his personality and professional ethics. During his time as a prosecutor, he was known for his rare compassion. He had even been moved to tears when facing defendants in difficult financial circumstances. After becoming a lawyer, he regularly provided free legal advice to wrongfully accused people who couldn't afford to pay. People who had worked with and interacted with Mr. Lee all shared the same assessment. This was a person who couldn't bear injustice and was always ready to stand up for society's vulnerable. This image of an upright and compassionate lawyer made the case even more mysterious. Why would someone so beloved by many become the victim of such a brutal murder? The sudden death sparked many rumors in Jeju. Some said that Mr. Lee had been assassinated because he was about to expose corruption of a candidate in the Jeju governor election that took place a year before his death in 1998. Police established a specialized investigation team and offered a reward of 10 million won, approximately $10,000, showing strong determination, but ultimately couldn't catch the perpetrator. The investigation team was disbanded, and the case remained unsolved. After 15 years in November 2014, the 15-year statute of limitations expired, and the case officially became an unsolved case. In 2016, Lee Sung-yong's son requested the What's New team to investigate the case, but due to lack of materials, the investigation was halted. Back to the present, in 2019, an important informant appeared, not just a witness, but someone claiming to have hired the killer. This was a major breakthrough for the What's New team. SBS reporters immediately flew to Cambodia to meet the informant and conduct an in-depth interview. Mr. Kim introduced himself as a former action team leader of a criminal organization called Utakpa in Jeju. Around August or September 1999, he was instructed by the then leader, Mr. Baek, to teach lawyer Lee a lesson. However, this didn't mean killing him, just beating him up. Mr. Kim began planning the crime with another organization member known as Seagull. At that time, they heard that lawyer Lee was a high-ranking swordsman, so they prepared a very sharp weapon, a cleaver-like knife ground very thin and sharp. However, Mr. Kim claimed that at that time, it wasn't him but Seagull who carried out the murder alone. He only ordered, "Attack his thigh with the knife." But the next day, he received a call from Seagull. "Brother, things didn't go according to plan." According to the story, at around 3 a.m. on the day of the incident, Seagull had followed lawyer Lee as he left a bar. He attacked Mr. Lee on a deserted road. However, lawyer Lee resisted very strongly. Seagull felt that 1 or 2 strikes weren't enough, so he repeatedly stabbed the upper part of Mr. Lee's body. When he came to his senses, lawyer Lee had stopped breathing. According to Mr. Kim, when the case became serious, Seagull went into hiding and later, tormented by guilt, committed suicide. This happened just 2 months before the statute of limitations expired. This is what Mr. Kim was claiming. According to him, Seagull was the direct perpetrator who wielded the knife, and this person is now deceased. When asked why he decided to reveal the truth at this time, Mr. Kim explained that he had lived with guilt toward the victim's family for too long. He wanted to apologize and clarify the truth before it was too late, although he knew well that he wouldn't face legal punishment because the statute of limitations had expired. The key question now was, were Mr. Kim's statements reliable? Back in South Korea, the What's New production team began conducting a thorough verification process. The first step was to consult with criminal profiling experts. These experts all noted that Mr. Kim's testimony contained too many specific details that would be difficult to just imagine or hear from someone else. Particularly impressive was the description of the murder weapon in Mr. Kim's testimony. He drew and described the weapon in extreme detail. Based on this sketch, the production team had a knife of similar shape and size manufactured. When testing on a material with hardness similar to the human body, they discovered that this type of knife could easily penetrate the rib cage with just a single stab. This finding further strengthened the credibility of Mr. Kim's description of the murder weapon. However, the production team still felt something was wrong. Mr. Kim described in detail what Seagull did, how he stabbed, how he did it. but glossed over what he himself had done at that time. Later, the production team sought out Mr. Beck, the leader of the Utakpa criminal organization who allegedly ordered the crime. They discovered that Mr. Beck had died in 2008, so the information couldn't be verified. However, they were able to meet the current leader of Utakpa. Through this, they found important new information. At the time when Mr. Kim said he received instructions from the leader, Mr. Beck was actually in prison. This contradicted Mr. Kim's testimony, who had stated that he met the leader at a restaurant and received instructions. The character Siegel, who was said to have carried out the murder, also had many suspicious points. He was a real person, but rather than committing suicide due to guilt, as Mr. Kim claimed, he actually committed suicide due to financial problems. Of course, he might have felt guilty about the murder, but why commit suicide just 2 months before the statute of limitations expired, when his crime was about to be legally erased? This didn't seem logical. Additionally, they discovered that Mr. Kim had been expelled from the organization due to drug and gambling issues. Finally, the production team couldn't help but suspect Mr. Kim, and the television program was produced in a way that cast doubt on him. Meanwhile, the Unsolved Case Task Force of the Jeju Police Department received information about the informant from the production team and began reinvestigating the Lee Sung-yong murder case in late June 2020. Police spent months reviewing previous investigation files and gathering additional testimonies. Although the statute of limitations had expired, they still felt the need to clarify the truth of the case. When reviewing the case, police noticed a noteworthy point. Mr. Kim had been abroad for a long time. In South Korean criminal procedure law, there is a provision stating that for criminals who flee abroad, the time spent abroad will be suspended from counting toward the statute of limitations. This was the key point. Police immediately calculated the time Mr. Kim had been abroad. Initially, the statute of limitations for the case was November 5, 2014. However, after confirming that Mr. Kim had been abroad for more than a year, the deadline was extended to after December 2015. Importantly, in July 2015, 5 months before the new deadline, South Korea passed the Taiwan Law, abolishing the statute of limitations for murder. This meant that the Lee Sung-yong murder case could also apply this law, and the statute of limitations had been abolished. Police immediately charged Mr. Kim with hiring someone to commit murder. Now, punishment became possible. In August 2021, police arrested Mr. Kim in Cambodia and brought him back to South Korea. During the investigation, Mr. Kim denied his entire interview. "What I said in the TV program was all fiction. I knew lawyer Lee, so I said those things. It was all lies." It seems he felt safe providing information, thinking the statute of limitations had expired. Finally, Mr. Kim had to stand trial. He was charged with being an accomplice in lawyer Lee's murder and threatening the What's New production team. After watching the TV program and seeing content unfavorable to him, he had called and threatened the production team. "I'm coming to South Korea, you've killed me twice, so I'll return half of it." In February 2022, the first trial took place, and Mr. Kim was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison for the threat. However, unfortunately, he was acquitted of the murder charge. The court recognized Mr. Kim as the main suspect, but considered there wasn't enough evidence to prove it. A confession alone was not sufficient. The prosecutor immediately appealed, and the appellate court reversed the first trial verdict. Mr. Kim was sentenced to 12 years in prison for murder. Although there was no direct evidence showing he had killed the victim, the court recognized that he had participated in the crime. Mr. Kim's detailed testimony in the interview about aspects of the case that the police didn't know was considered circumstantial evidence. The court also held that he certainly knew the victim could die, so he couldn't avoid responsibility as an accomplice in the murder. However, the very day after the appellate verdict, Mr. Kim appealed to the Supreme Court, and the result was reversed again. The Supreme Court examined the case with a view similar to the first trial court, finding a lack of objective evidence. They canceled the appellate verdict and sent the case back for reconsideration from the beginning. This extended the trial time. For over 2 years, an intense legal battle took place. Finally, in July 2023, a new trial was opened. The final verdict for Mr. Kim was acquittal. The court declared that it was difficult to acknowledge the truth about hiring someone to commit murder or conspiracy based solely on his own testimony, indirect evidence. According to the principle that no one can be tried twice for the same crime, Mr. Kim has now become a person unrelated to the Lee Sung-yong case. This is truly disappointing. And those are the two cases for today. What do you think about these two cases? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.